Welcome to Startup Health Now, the weekly show celebrating the healthcare transformers and changemakers reimagining healthcare. My name is Stephen Krein, and on today's episode, we're going to sit down with Derek Flanzraich, the CEO of Greatist, a next-generation media company in health and wellness. This is going to be a great episode.
It is the duty of leaders to lead, of the creative to create, of the daring to do. The free world expects leadership of us. Its fate and our fate depends upon our leadership. We are industrious, inventive, restless, with the fires that burn within us. But I say that nothing is easy, and the best things are the hardest. And all our troubles, all our immense difficulties, now and in the future, can I say be solved if we have the will, the courage. The future is to those who take it.
Welcome back, Derek. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I'm excited. I feel like we had to do a lot of episodes to get ready for you because, watching you over the last several years.
I've been watching a lot of episodes to prepare for this, so perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, I joke, but in some ways serious because it's interesting to have watched you execute over the last several years as you built Greatist. You're so obsessed with both design and user experience and brand. And I've always admired your discipline around caring about it, even when you were a little tiny, early in the development of Greatist. So glad you're here. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. But before we do, I want to hear a little bit about Greatist, and then I want to understand a little bit why you started and how you started Greatist.
Sure thing. Where should I start?
What's Greatist?
What's Greatist? So we're a next generation media company, very focused on health. So, sort of bringing in my story in for what it's worth. I grew up a big kid, struggling with my weight, really feeling like every time I turned on the TV or opened up a magazine or searched in Google, that all the results that were coming were like talking at me, not with me. Mm-hmm. And everything was not really on my side and trying to sell me something and trying to, speak to me in a way that I felt like the world was shifting and people shouldn't be spoken to in that way. It definitely didn't resonate. And I looked around at all my friends and I saw them feeling the same way. And my belief is basically there's this big generational shift in how people think about health. I think it's happening right now. Mm-hmm. That people are moving away from health and fitness being the point and more to it being just a part of living this active, happy, better, longer, more awesome life.
So does that mean there's not people just focused on health and those aren't? It's just everybody's thinking about it and consuming it in different ways?
Yeah, I think people care a lot about it, but they care about it not like for it. They care about it because they want to feel good. Mm-hmm. And they want to, they love how it makes them feel more creative and more happy. And as I grew up, I was struggling with my health and fitness and my weight. I felt like all those things were worth a lot more than how I looked in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked that no one was telling that story. So anyways, I became obsessed with why doesn't something like this exist? And honestly became pretty mad about it.
Sure.
And
what kind of brands were you looking at that you were kind of looking for this information from?
I would, every time I searched in Google, I would end up on content farms, right? Mm-hmm. That, now you see less and less because I'd like to think we come up more and more.
Sure.
But, the results were literally written by publicly traded content farms who were just writing article after article with untrustworthy content. You open up a magazine, every magazine is the same. They all write the same thing over and over. They promise six-pack abs in 6 weeks and these unrealistic portrayals of people who the real story has suffered to even appear that way on the magazine cover. And yet that's been held out to us as sort of the epitome of success. And so I always felt like it made me feel worse. I felt like you turn on the TV and you've got, Dr. Oz selling you, magic pills, and you turn on the TV and it's a show called The Biggest Loser. That was the biggest thing when I was growing up. Still pretty big, actually. But it's literally called The Biggest Loser. And that, maybe a clever name, but really kind of like a damning portrayal of how traditional media has sort of shown health. Mm-hmm. And it blew my mind no one had built something different. It blew my mind that no one had built what I felt was a brand and a business that people loved and trusted and believed was really on their side. And so that's really why I started Greatist now over 4 years ago.
And so you said next generation. So
Yes.
what are you doing differently now?
Yeah.
Because of what you know.
Well, so how do you build like the branded business that people love in health and wellness? And I have to be totally honest, when I started it 4 years ago, I wasn't quite sure. I felt like there was a real missing void in terms of a brand that people believed in. And so, you mentioned it in the beginning, but I think today we're very brand first. We believe that brand is the reason why people make decisions. It influences people more heavily than I think people recognize, and brands are the ones people return to time and time again because we think of our world and the things that we're interested in. We immediately think of the things we're spending money on, the things we're paying attention to. Brands, I think, are just so powerfully important. And I think it's been too easy to make money in the health and wellness space for a long time. And so it's been easy for brands to cut corners. And
so why the name Greatist? What was the genesis of that?
So, the vision was let's build a brand that's different and that's more like your friend that's just a little further along, and that opens up a world where health is thought of in this different way. And so part of that was feeling like the traditional media was sort of depicting everyone as either a couch potato or a perfect, flawless athlete. And people are not like that, right? Like, I am not the couch potato who just eats a pint of ice cream 3 times a day, maybe once a day, right? And I'm not the perfect, flawless athlete. And honestly, I'll never be. But there's never been a word for people in the middle. And so the idea was to create an identity, a lifestyle for people who aren't perfect, who aren't the greatest, right? They're nor are they the worstest, right? But they're greatists. They're just actively trying to get better. Like an artist works on art, a greatist works on being great. And so the idea was really to champion
I love that last one. That artist works on.
Yeah.
I've never heard that used, so it's well said.
The idea is because you can never, we're trying to tell the story of how health is a journey, right? That it's about falling in love with the things that are good for you. It's not about suffering through things that people tell you are good for you because you'll never stick with them. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's the whole brand message. I didn't know really how to build that, or where to start.
But so you chose a name from the beginning. It was going to be
very broad,
the defining brand.
Literally an identity for people to sort of take on. I made this decision because I'm a greatest, right? Not the greatest. So we started with content. And I started with content.
What was the first piece of content?
I remember, the first piece, hopefully no one will search for this on the site. No, I'm sure we've updated it. If I remember correctly, one of the first pieces of content we wrote was superfood blueberries.
And who wrote it?
I did, or at least edited it.
Sure.
My name might even be still on it. It was called Superfood Blueberries. It was about how good blueberries are for you, which, by the way, still good for you.
All right, we'll have to have those on as little bowl of them on all our episodes.
Oh yeah, blueberries are amazing. But we set out to do stuff differently from day one.
With this even with this first article,
absolutely,
it was different than other articles.
In fact, we didn't even launch the site for 3 months. We started writing. We wrote for 3 months before the site went live. It was very purposeful because we wanted people to get to the site. We wanted them to trust us, but we didn't want them to see only 2 articles. Mm-hmm. We wanted them to see 50. And so we worked through writing what we wanted to be the highest quality content in the space.
What made this article about blueberries different, though, than all the other articles about blueberries?
Yeah. What makes this night different than all the other nights? Yeah. So, and this is exactly, I think, people don't, everyone says I write high quality content,
that's
right?
Yeah.
So we, from day one, every fact in every article has been cited by a scientific study from PubMed. So if you go to Greatist today and you look at any article that has any remote scientific, reasoning in it, there's a work cited. And that's never shifted or changed. Every article that gets published is approved by at least 2 experts if it needs it. So if it's a recipe list, that's one thing. But if it's anything like superfood blueberries, at least 2 experts, often 3 to 5, are approving it before it goes live.
Seems like a lot of work for a simple article, right?
Oh my God! Yeah.
So your thought is go high quality.
Yes.
But you're now 4 years in, and has the quality waned as the volumes picked up? Have you gotten more? How do you view quality as such an important piece of what you do?
I think quality is everything. I think quality in the experience. I think quality in the content itself. I think quality in like the communication. We think getting every detail perfect is among the biggest jobs, because if you get every detail perfect, then you build trust with people. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is build that brand that people trust. And we're using content as like the step one of a many step plan, a plan to build that branded business that people really love, that's on their side, and that does lots more than just content. You've heard me say that for 4 years, right? So this idea that content is like, I basically believe content marketing is the most cost-effective form of marketing there is. And I'm saying that as somebody who's written 2 to 3 articles per day on our site for 4 years.
You're still right.
We don't produce more content than that. We just produce better and better content. And then we go back to our old stuff and catch it up to where we're at. And so that means if you were to say, here's unlimited resources, how many articles are you putting out every day? We probably wouldn't put out that many more than 2 to 3 articles. We would just make them that good. And the reason is because the internet has changed profoundly.
Even in the 4 years that you started.
Even in the 4 years. And in fact, it's really changed in a way that I think has really benefited us, right? I think the belief was, the way I always think about this stuff is...
It's funny, it used to be the opposite. It used to be churn out the content.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we've gone through sort of 2 major shifts. So the first shift when I started the business was create as much content as you possibly can so that Google search indexes you the most and that you pop up enough, right? And then the second wave that happened just in the last few years was the Facebook wave that is still there but starting to wane, which is write content that people will click on. BuzzFeed is the perfect example of that, right? So, what we're seeing is that as these platforms get better at bringing the best content to whatever people are searching for, the best answer, regardless of what form that content is, if you are not creating the best content, you basically fall by the wayside.
No one's going to share it. No one's going to click. No one's going to go anywhere.
So, sometimes I say it's like you skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck is now. And so that's always the very long-term vision. Greatist has always been a very long-term brand. And because profoundly, I think somebody needs to build that in the consumer health space, but also because I think that's an opportunity to build not just a big business in consumer health, but the business in consumer health.
So what is the business? And a little bit about maybe the metrics or how you measure success, because I'm fascinated by your commitment to that quality, but that you've actually built a business around it. So it's one thing to say I put up good content, but you've actually, being a next generation media company, there's an underlying business model that I think is pretty unique as well. So talk a little bit about that.
So what is the next generation media model? To me, it's an emphasis on quality over quantity, right? It's very social driven, which we've been for a very long time. It's very mobile first and technology heavy. So we're all those things. Our team is half writers, editors, digital marketers, and designers, but then half sales and tech, developers and UI UX designers. So it's
Are you using your own technology?
Everything built in-house. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We're on Drupal, but everything is built in-house. So we're tech-driven solution, but we have now we've just recently hit 10 million unique visitors a month. So that puts us among the top sites in the space.
Right. And how much break that 10 million down for me?
Yeah. Where are they coming from?
How much is bought? How much is social? How much is search?
Totally. So we have 10 million. So imagine 10 million people come every month, right? We've grown 250% year over year. We've never spent a cent on acquiring that traffic, even today.
You do not spend any money to drive traffic to your website.
Zero.
Or viewership.
If you gave me $10, I'd put it into creating better content.
Great. Okay, so quality first drives all original traffic from search, authentic traffic, search or social.
So today, and the majority of our traffic comes from Google search. It turns out now today is a huge driver for us.
You say today, it wasn't always the case?
Well, we sort of set out to be like the anti-search play. We sort of thought social distribution is the only way we're going to get away with writing quality
because the search was overtaken
quantity.
by those content farms and kind of the...
Yeah, and we felt like the media world was changing and that people were even looking and turning for health and wellness information, turning to their friends and these social networks over search because it had stopped sort of serving them. But Google, and search is not stupid. They also realized they have to do a better job of serving them. And so in some ways we were sort of perfectly in the center. But Pinterest was really big for us, still our third or fourth biggest traffic driver today. Facebook growing, but not the majority of our traffic, like many next-gen publishers. And then email is a huge and growing part of our traffic.
What do you mean by email? Just newsletters?
Newsletters. We send out Monday through Friday, an amazing daily newsletter.
How many different newsletters?
So we send one newsletter. Actually, we have workouts that you can get to every day, but the primary one we have is called the Greatist Daily.
Sure.
Catchy
So
name.
once
Comes out daily from Greatist.
Going for quality, not quantity, because a lot of people would go and say, go do 10 newsletters.
Totally. One newsletter that we focus on, and that today goes out to nearly 1.5 million people every single day, right? So huge. I mean, we're larger than many email-driven businesses
Do
today.
you talk about open rates or engagement rates?
Yeah, I mean, they're very high. I mean, we produce a good newsletter. I would tell you the numbers, except that I don't know them offhand. It's probably somewhere roughly around 20% open rate, probably above average numbers.
Sure. So you got all this great traffic, great viewers. How do you monetize?
So, we've built it in a way very strategically to really have this audience. It's one thing to say I have 30 million page views every month, right? That's one thing to say. It's another thing to say I have 10 million uniques that freaking love our site, and million plus followers on social media and 1 million plus email subscribers who we can really reach. And so when we turn to a brand, so the way that we make the majority of our revenue today is from what we call brand partnerships, which is probably for lack of a better word, it's sort of a next gen version of advertising. And this
is inspired by we call it the BuzzFeed models and some of the others.
So BuzzFeed, Vice, Vox, these are all have sort of paved the way. And for what it's worth, digital ad spend is the fastest growing part of the ad spend space. Native content ad spend is the fastest growing part of that. So we're definitely in the right area. We believe, and it's true, that we can activate and engage 20 and 30-year-olds who care about their health better than anybody else, than any other publisher, and than anybody else, period. We literally think we have the pulse and the reach and the voice that resonates with them the most. So that's what we pitch these brands, and that is really hard to find. And I actually think it's harder to find than I expected it to be.
So what are you doing with the brands that is resonating?
So probably the best example right now, sort of our anchor brand, is Kind Healthy Snacks. Everyone knows the snack bars. What we do is we kind of sort of act like a
cashew and sea salt. It's my favorite bar.
Yeah. What's the one I like? I like the cinnamon pecan something or other. If you put cinnamon in it, I love it. Actually, right. I'm very easily pleased.
I'm the same way with cashews.
No, see? But they do this. The way we act is almost like an ad agency. So we're a creative agency. We come up with a campaign that is in our voice, and we know will resonate with our audience because we're the experts. We do this all day, right? We only do 2 to 3 articles a day, so they have to be good, right? And we wrap them around in this campaign that sort of delivers on what a potential brand partner wants. How do they want their brand to be perceived among this audience? Maybe they want to shift their brand perception.
Right. So tell me about Kind and what you're doing with them.
So Kind is a perfect example. So Kind, we're doing a huge campaign called Reconnect. We've now done it for 4 or 5 months. It's one of our largest campaigns that we've done.
And they're not doing it anywhere else.
They're not doing it anywhere else.
Own developed program.
So Kind said we really want to be known as the brand that's focused on people getting back to the good stuff. Sort of the real, connecting back to their environment, connecting back to their relationships, connecting back to food, connecting back to the things that matter. And so we crafted a campaign in which every month is focused on one of those categories. So the whole campaign is called Reconnect. Let's reconnect. #Let's reconnect. And every month we have content, we have social, we have email campaigns, we have events and videos all sort of tying together and underlying this message. A message, by the way, that we would have done ourselves, but that Kind almost enables us to do better than we would have.
Sure. And so you must be selective about your partners, given that you're being such really integrated partners with them, because it doesn't seem like just, hey, sign up for advertising on my website and go.
It's basically the complete opposite. So, it's deeply customized. We build really long-term partnerships. Every brand we've worked with so far has come back, and most brands we say no to, actually pretty quickly. And the real reason is because we ask these brands to really want what we offer. We don't promise something we can't deliver on.
So they come with a check, but it's not aligned?
No, sorry. Yeah, we do that all day. My sales team, which came in initially, skeptical of that approach.
Sure. I'm probably frustrated when you say no or you nix something.
But now they're the ones that say no. I'm probably the one who's like, well, maybe we can come up with something great. Like, they're the ones that say no. And the reason is not because we are purists for the sake of like purity.
Yeah.
It's not because we are, like social good for the sake of social good. We're building a for-profit business. It's because we literally believe that if we build long-term, deep relationships with these brands that believe in the same thing we do, that those will be much larger in the future.
Sure.
If we don't deliver on a campaign, the brand doesn't come back.
So what are they measuring? What is Krein looking at, saying,
So it's actually a core question to this, right? It's something that is like a very kind of a debate right now in the space. Like, what is this actually getting you? Kind, for example, is a campaign that includes 0 impressions. So the traditional way of measuring these campaigns is, all right, how many people saw my ads? We don't even do that. In fact, if we had our way, we basically wouldn't show any ads at all because our audience doesn't look at them. But what our audience does do is it reads, engages, shares, and then takes action on our content experiences. And so what we do is we sort of include Kind or any brand within that natively.
Okay, so it's not a product placement.
It's not a product placement.
How does it differ from product placement?
We don't mention the product at all. They don't have any influence over the actual content itself, but every piece of every part of this campaign is brought to you in partnership with Kind. So they're really adding that value.
The brand with the production of the content.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about having cashews and sea salt bars mentioned.
That's right. And the reason, the reason is not because we're sticklers.
Yeah. The
reason is because our audience can smell manipulation from a mile away. Millennials are like the most skeptical people ever. I'm super skeptical as a millennial. The minute I smell that any brand was involved, I stop reading. But if a brand works with a brand I love, these two brands come together, they produce something that's powerfully of value to me. Let's say, for example, a 7-day healthy eating challenge that I do myself and that I see lots of other people doing and that's brought to me by Greatist and Kind. My perception and awareness of this brand changes pretty dramatically. And if I'm looking at every experience on my mobile phone, which everyone is now, 70% of our audience is mobile and tablet. I mean, we're not even thinking about desktop anymore. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
But what do you do on your mobile phone? You don't look at ads. You're literally there to read a piece of content. And increasingly, you're not even going directly to these sites. You're actually coming to Greatist through Facebook or through Pinterest or through search.
So I want to shift gears. And by the way, I could talk for a lot longer on this, but I want to get to a couple other topics.
Yeah.
Design.
Yeah.
You probably had a ton of people, whether it's investors or others along the way, who have said, you're too obsessed with design this early. You should care about other things right now. But I've always admired your commitment to great design and have continued to innovate even in what that means for your brand, whether it's a logo. Very few people know you're the inspiration behind the redesign of our last logo into this one. I think, quite frankly,
much better.
Drawing out this in pencil at one of our healthcare transformer summits.
It was a pretty, frankly, it came a long way. Let's put it that way.
But really, I mean, you're among entrepreneurs. You got it. A lot of entrepreneurs don't. Why is design, and why do you think design is so critical today, and why more critical, in fact, than a lot of other things that entrepreneurs focus on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. So I was really struck by a couple stories that helped inspire my sort of obsessive focus on the experience, right? Of which I think design is a core part. The feel, sort of the feel that you have, I think is the core part. The first was Mint.com. Sort of an old story, but I remember reading about how they basically put a mask on other products that already existed that was gorgeous. And when they launched the site, no one bothered to check because the site looked so good. Every piece was right, every pixel was perfect, every little flavor, like the little text at the bottom was interesting and had a voice and felt right. No one bothered to check whether they were properly encrypted when they entered their credit card data. And this blew my mind. Like, it blew my mind that people would trust the site without even looking if they had the little lock button in their browser and put their credit cards in. So this is a true story, and Mint actually tells now, because they didn't get into too much trouble, that their safety was not very good in the early days. But people just did it because of the design. So one, like the amount that compels people shifts their mind around like what this is and even what they're willing to do with it and how much their sort of mind share and how much heart they're going to put into this, I think, is or wallet in this case. I think that really stuck with me early on. Mm-hmm. The other, using a media example, is Disney. So I'm a very weird and obsessive around Walt Disney and Disney as a company.
But like, take your mouse ears off before you start the tape.
I'm still mad that you made me do that. Yeah. No. So I try to wear them everywhere now. Yeah. I love the story of Walt Disney, who to me is like one of the most amazing. I mean, there's a lot of people have heard a lot of things about him, but if you really know his story, he's an amazing entrepreneur, a real visionary, basically a pretty nice guy, and obsessed with adapting to technology, failed lots of times, built an amazing team, and was really ahead of his time. And so one of the things that he was the most amazing at was getting every detail perfect. And there's this story. It's a short story, I promise, but there's this story of when he's first doing Disneyland, and he goes, they're all these Imagineers, who are the people who were building this park, were very excited to show off all the new stuff that they had done, and they'd created this coach, like a stage coach, like with a horse-drawn carriage. So he goes into the horse-drawn carriage. It's perfect. It's gorgeous. Looks amazing. He sits down and he sort of says, the curtains are wrong. And they say, what do you mean? He says, these curtains, they're not right. And they say, well, it's like we couldn't find the original curtains. Sorry, Walt. These are good curtains. No one will really know that. Look at the rest of the carriage. And he says, look, we can't do this unless the curtains are right. And I remember reading that story and thinking through why that was. And when somebody gets on that stagecoach, they're not going to notice the curtain is right. But if it's wrong, they'll notice something is off. If Mint's pixels weren't perfect, people wouldn't put in their credit card. By the way, I've done that lots of times where I put my credit card in and not put it in because I thought the site was bad, And so,
actually, it's an interesting component to it, which is what bad design makes you not do.
Right, totally, yeah. Right? But I think, so what can it not do? Well, I think for one, it can definitely drive you not to come back. I think two, it can definitely drive you to not trust the site. I mean, putting your credit card info seems like a very big step to take. But what about just sharing an article, or even just telling it to a friend, or maybe, signing up with a service? So I think the experience in health and wellness, especially, there's such a stark contrast between the things that have been, which is sort of snake oilsy, commercial about 6-pack abs in 6 weeks and, burn your flab off, in 36 minutes and on and on and on. People are sort of used to that. And so presenting them with something different that's heartfelt and beautiful and thought through. I mean, we are brutal about this stuff. Like, we want to get every single tiny thing right.
And you talked about websites, but you really need to think about each one of the things that people experience. An investor deck,
totally,
business card.
Oh yeah,
any.
You see my stuff; it's gorgeous.
And it's funny because you talk about this notion of people spend so much time trying to get everything right, and then it looks terrible, and it really doesn't matter because I'm sorry, it doesn't matter they got everything right underneath it.
Yes.
But on the flip side, very early on when you have nothing, making sure it looks like you have something. And where's the balance there, right? Where's the balance of having it all be fluff and look beautiful, but there be nothing underneath versus the opposite?
Style versus substance. Yeah. So I'm bad at faking it till I make it. I'm just bad at this. Like, I'm always a person who wants to prove it first. And I've always thought our product could be so much better, but I think I've always been probably more critical of what we built than anyone else. And I think style is really important, but I don't think style without substance is worth anything. In fact, that might be the worst, right? It's if you are able to, like, paint the pig really nicely, but it's still a pig, right? And so I think I'm not sure what the balance is. I guess I think it's more of I don't really appreciate or kind of understand how you can try to present something that isn't great. I've always thought Greatist was really great. I've been proud of it since day one, since we launched. And I couldn't be prouder of it today, even though there's nobody who thinks it could be more improved than me. But I do think design is sort of like, if you're building a brand, you're building a product, design can't be an afterthought. It has to be a pivotal part of each.
What if you're not Derek, though? What if you don't get it? Or I should say, don't inherently get it? What if you don't understand how to do it? Like, you intellectually understand it, right?
Think so.
But what happens when you'd love to be able to do that, but you just have no idea how? What does an entrepreneur who has some of the substance get the design when they can't afford it, or when it's the early days and they really want to put their best foot forward?
I think you need to find somebody who really gets it.
And is that hiring someone, contracting? Is it an agent? I mean, again, I'm going scrappy here.
No, yeah.
Like,
I mean, my take on it is that it's really easy. Part of this is that this space is filled with charlatans, right? Like, everyone says they're good at design, and anyone can show you that project they worked on once when they were really a part of a huge team at an ad agency. It had nothing to do with it, right? So it's really hard. I have to tell you, some of the highest ranked designers and creative agencies in the city that we've met with for various reasons, I've been really unimpressed with their work. So I do think you have to really get it. Also, good design comes really expensively. In the early days of Greatist, the only thing we spent on, like, literally everyone was working for free. I was working out of a 24-hour Starbucks. The only thing we spent on was a designer that
I want to dig into that. So you're talking, you've got limited funds, limited resources. You'd still prioritize design.
I mean, I literally did. Oh, yeah. Now, to be fair, I convinced a designer that I found on Dribbble, which anyone can go on and look, that had a style that I kind of wanted. So there was already an element of me I was like, I want that. Yeah. And by the way, my sort of taste, or at least my sort of maybe eye, has evolved too. Yeah. The thing that we look like early on is we're like growing in, I would say, sophistication without losing the fun, sort of accessible funny personality. But our sort of look keeps changing and getting better and better, I think. But even early on, I prioritized design, and I sort of yielded to people that I thought knew more than me. But it is hard. I would say that I'm very quick to acknowledge when I'm not that great at stuff. And today, despite me being very, very involved with all, like, the top sort of branding and design decisions, I think, for what it's worth, my job is, like, to build the brand. If anything, my job is to, like, champion and protect it first and foremost. But I have people on my team who are better than me at knowing what looks good and what doesn't. And so I basically yield to them unless I feel really strongly, and then I better have a good reason, Right.
So when thinking about it, I want to kind of shift gears again a little bit here. So we talked about design, we talked about unique model. You come across, and I think it's one of the most important characteristics of an entrepreneur is confident, right? Mm-hmm. Not cocky, just confident in what you know. Today you sit here having achieved a lot with your business. You're profitable. You've got 10 million uniques a month. You've figured out how to do that without spending any dollars on driving that traffic, but on investing appropriately. Yeah. You partner with some great brands. What are some of the things that really you're concerned about, that keep you up at night, that you think about as your challenges? And I say that because one of the things that oftentimes entrepreneurs misunderstand is someone's killing it and they have no concerns. They're just going. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Having been an entrepreneur for 20 years, you're confident about certain things and you're scared shitless about others.
Oh, yeah.
And both at the same time. So where's your head right now as you think about the next couple of years with Greatist and what you're most concerned about?
Well, I mean, I think so. First-time founder, started this right after a short stint at another startup out of college. So, I have very little experience, I would say. And 4 years, a little over 4 years into building this, I'd say that I'm much more worried about everything than I ever was. The more I know, the more I learn, the more paranoid I get about everything. And I think, by the way, never been more confident about Greatist. And I woke up, every day, but this morning, for some reason, of a lot of mornings, I woke up and was just like, wow, things are so good at Greatist right now. Things are just we're literally everything that we want. We're making it happen, or it's about to happen. It's on the way, and that's the strangest feeling for me because I've spent 4 years worrying everything was going to go terribly wrong, and it's been a weird experience for me. But I do think that it's been a journey, and so I'd say early on, I think I didn't realize how little I knew. And that allowed me to be sometimes, by the way, cocky, right?
Well,
sometimes
blissfully ignorant, right?
Blissfully ignorant, and I'd say there's actually some strength to that. There's some stuff that I think you can do when you're like that, like convincing people to work for nothing.
Yeah, confidence.
Some of this stuff early on that I couldn't kind of possibly get away with today because I kind of know too much, I think. But I will say it's also been 4 years of me really eating a lot of crow. Is that a phrase?
Sure.
I think it's 4 years of people telling you you're not there yet. No, sure, this is nice, but nothing compared to everyone else. Feeling like how come no one is noticing what we're doing? We've always been under the radar. I think we've always built it differently, and it's been hard for people to understand.
You're also you're building a business at a time when no one's building media businesses the way they are in healthcare, I should say, health and wellness.
We really stick out in that sense, in the sense that we're different, right? Yeah. And I think it's funny now talking to people, 4 years into it, who sort of say, oh, okay, I guess you did kind of do that thing. And as we move into new things, and as we move into the vision, the long-term huge vision that I've always had, that I've been telling people for a long time, it's funny to start moving in that direction and hearing people saying, oh yeah, I guess you really did do all those things you said you were going to do. But I will say a large part of that has been me recognizing how little I know and worrying about every little possible thing.
Well, it's always been fun to talk about Greatist. Out of our portfolio, we have 109 startup health companies. You're the only media brand built, and not only built, but succeeding in ways that I think you talked about doubters and people that didn't see what it was until you did it.
Right.
Fascinating. What would you say are the biggest mistakes you made? What are the one or two things you think you looking back might have done differently or wish you had done differently?
How long you got? So many things. So many things. I think, if anything, I probably learned best by messing things up terribly first. And I think somebody said, this is not mine, but somebody said that startups are built basically through mistakes well handled. And I do think that the only reason we're around now, 4 years, most of the companies that I started, when I started Greatist, most of the companies that started at the same time are no longer around. Definitely not in the consumer space. That's been a tough space. And I think the reason why we're still around is because at the last minute, my total terrible mess ups, we handled them okay, and we got out of it.
What was the biggest one that comes to mind?
Yeah, probably the one of them that really comes to mind is not taking vacations.
Yeah,
that sounds really weird, but I think there's this.
How long did you go before taking one?
2.5 years. So it's now 4+ years, and 2.5 years in, I took my first vacation. Took a week off. I take one now every 6 months, a whole week, no email. And it is.
Do you work weekends?
I work them less and less. I probably do one, Saturday maybe I'll work some. I work because I like to work, not because I feel like I have to anymore. But I also work smart, very core part of our culture. No vacation policy, no set hours. People work at all times when they feel convenient. They take vacations when they can. But I really wasn't living that out. In the first couple of years, I worked nonstop. I took no vacations. I worked every day, every weekend. And I thought that was what you were supposed to do.
You don't make good decisions.
You don't make good decisions. And here I am saying that the reason I started this company is because I learned that moving a little more and sleeping a little more and eating a little better made me a better person. And I was struggling to do a lot of that stuff. I read recently a Medium post by Dustin Moskovitz, one of the co-founders of Facebook. And he was sort of answering this question. He did a very similar thing. I mean, I'm not him, he's amazing. But, yeah, of course. But the question they ask him is, was that a core part of Facebook's early success, that they all killed themselves for years? And he says, no, I actually think if we didn't, we would have been much more successful. Yeah. And so I actually think this exact same thing. And I think, by the way, the world is shifting. I'd like to think Greatist is shifting some of that perception, part of that, not just, in that wave, but shaping that wave. But I think that's probably the biggest mistake. By the way, I came back from that vacation. We ended up letting go the most people we've ever let go at once. It was the worst.
You had clarity.
Worst. It was, oh my God, such clarity.
Yeah.
And by the way, I go away now, like I mentioned, every 6 months, and I come back and I go.
For the jobs.
We don't fire. Yeah, we try.
No, but there is a rejuvenation that happens when you do that.
But it's rejuvenate. So it's one. I have to say, when I was in that 2.5 years, when somebody said you need to be rejuvenated, I would say I'm fine. I didn't feel like I needed that. I actually think the real convincing factor is that week off is not a vacation, it's a business trip. And I spend that week working on me as a leader and working on our long-term vision. And are we on the track that I expect us to be? And is that the right track that we should be on? And what are the things that I should be prioritizing that I'm not? And these questions that we all know we should be addressing, but you never address in your day-to-day, because as a CEO, as a founder, as really any top exec, you have no time to get to the things that you get to.
Do you think the company gets transformed every time you take a vacation? Honestly, when you take a week off?
I literally think when I come back, I think that's the best work I've done in 6 months.
Why not take it more often?
So it's a good question. I think the real truth is that it's increasingly my job to get me to a place where I'm doing that kind of work regularly. So that stuff that I'm doing every 6 months, I think unplugging is actually very, very healthy too. I think there's a real value to that in terms of probably mental rejuvenation. But I think that the real job of a CEO, which a CEO basically cannot do until they're at a certain size and have a certain people on the team, and have a certain almost resources that they feel confident about, they're not going out of business in a couple months, right? Until you have those things, it's very hard. But the real job of the CEO is not to do the day-to-day stuff. And that's a hard transition. It takes a long time to get there, I think. And but that's where I'm best. That's what I was built to do. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I love it 4 years in, is because I'm finally kind of able to do that kind of work more often.
Excellent. So we're going a little longer, so I apologize for that, but I have a couple quick questions.
Sorry, I got excited.
No, I'm going to ask you what's next. Couple real simple things.
Yeah.
Productivity hacks. What are you using internally, tools-wise? Slack, things like that are really helping you as CEO. What are your top 2 or 3 kind of tools you use?
So internally we use Asana, task management platform, actually founded by Dustin Moskovitz, small world. We like Asana a lot. It's something like a project management tool that's been a big help and helped to replace a lot of emails. We use Slack. I actually have a very torturous relationship with Slack, because I think while on the one hand it's helped in a lot of ways, I think in others it's not developed enough as a product for you to be able to really optimize it. And so I actually think it lessens productivity most of the time.
You guys do internal email with those 2 tools? Do you still have internal email?
And we still have internal email, but a lot less. Yeah. I mean, we went through a whole kill email phase, and we mostly killed a lot of email internally and rely on those 2 platforms.
What about meetings?
We do meetings. I don't think there needs to be we have a whole thing around meetings where we actually created let's see if I remember it. We created a four-part question to ask before the meeting starts. It's called WUSA. What is this meeting about? Who's supposed to be here? What are, what's the S? S is for something, and T is like takeaways, right? So what do we do next? And the goal is basically to make sure everyone is there, to make sure that nobody's there who, doesn't need to be, to make sure that there's like real takeaways that come out of it, and to make sure that people don't get distracted. So, really optimize and make sure meetings happen. What else do we use a lot internally? I don't know, those are good ones.
Cool. What are you reading right now? What's the latest book you read?
Oh my God, I try to read only books about dragons and swords and knights.
Still want to know what the book is.
What's the best book I've read recently? Best book I've read recently was an interesting book. It was like a futuristic book about a guy who accidentally kills death and then has to become death and like do this interesting weird job. And I forget what it was called, but it was really weird. And there's like a whole series of those weird books.
Cool.
I don't know if I loved it, but that's what I read recently.
Do you listen to podcasts?
I do sometimes. I wish I had more time too. The one I like is I'm so bad. It was Lewis Howes. I think it's called The Art of Greatness. He's awesome. He always interviews really cool people.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, on the Startup Health podcast.
Yeah, Startup Health Now, of course.
Startup Health Now.
All right. So, what's next for Greatist? We're sitting here 3 years from now.
Yeah.
What has to happen for you to feel really happy with the progress?
3 years.
Yeah.
Wow, so many things can happen. So the vision for Greatist has always been enormous. I've never been shy about that. We've always thought of content as step one of a multi-step plan. It's content, now we're monetizing that content, now we're profitable. The vision has always been, what are the users willing to pay for? I think media is really compelling. I think we can build a hell of a media business. I think we're on track, well on track. But I think that could be a springboard for a real consumer-driven health business, unlike any other. And we usually think of our company ending up more like the Weight Watchers of the future than we think of it ending up like the Rodale of the future, for example.
Engage.
We think it's about community. We think it's about groups. We think there is a monthly service that millennials will pay for that will help them get healthier. And probably with other people like them, and probably led by somebody who's just a little further along. And we don't know quite what that looks like, but some decentralized, digital-first, mobile-first version of what the Weight Watchers platform, not the program, is today. But we're one of the beauties of having a big audience and having built what I believe is the most effective user acquisition platform and the most organic platform, people with real trust who will try what we share with them, is that we can learn a lot and test a lot of things. And we don't accidentally spend 2 years building something that people don't really want.
Excellent. And what is literally next? What's coming up in the next few months?
Oh my God. Next few months, I mean, the big one is it's the first time I've ever mentioned it, but we are doing a little bit of a rebranding that we're excited about. So a lot of things, really trying to catch our colors, our fonts, our logo, the experience up to the voice, which we still think is the best part of our brand. By the way, don't get me wrong, I think the experience is pretty good, clearly.
But you're continuing to innovate on it.
But we're continuing to grow and innovate, and I think the evolution, I think people will be really thrilled. It's really cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, Derek, this has been good. I could have talked for a lot longer.
Yeah, that's
I
fun.
love when I get going. There's a whole bunch of other things we can talk about.
Oh,
so hopefully we'll
totally.
be back on another episode.
Yeah, I'd love to be back.
It's been honestly, having been an entrepreneur for 20 years, certain entrepreneurs you meet along the way, we've had a great opportunity to work together at Startup Health and get to see you literally just doing what you said you were going to do, and that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because lots of people talk and don't deliver, and I think it's really fantastic to see that although you do make mistakes along the way, you continue to innovate, build, and execute. It's a pleasure working with you. And we use this saying, as you know, called batteries included. And as part of our community, you're one of those people who just gives people energy and I think inspires a lot. So keep doing what you're doing and look forward to seeing the new redesign. Well, thank you. I'm very grateful for Startup Health, and probably wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the Startup Health community early on. And
I'm a very proud member of this organization. So thank you for making it happen and for including me. That was awfully kind.
We believe that. It's interesting to look back at your stats when you started, but
I know.
a small fraction of where you are
Very
now.
small.
So, very cool.
Still pretty big, but
Derek, always a pleasure.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.